LaRae Quy, it is such a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of the Experts Interview. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Art. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
You know, you've been a hero of mine for a long time with your writing, and I think I discovered you, and we compared notes. Probably one of your Smart Brief on leadership articles, and our good friend James, who was the editor at
Yes.
the time. And I've been curating your content on my weekly newsletter for a long time. I'm hoping it doesn't come along, could seem like stalking, but every time you write something and I share it, it's the most read of the week. So this
Oh,
is such an honor.
oh my goodness. No, thank you for sharing that with me. I mean, the reason I write to begin with is to sort of share my experiences. And it's not that everybody else is going to have the same experience, but I want listeners and readers to be prompted and encouraged to excavate the significance of their own stories
Ooh,
and their
they
own
do. It made you
experiences.
achieve that and then some. So I'd like to start in maybe a little bit of an odd place, but I want to start with a just a quick read, and I'm scanning on my notes over here of the reviews from your book. So, and these are on your website. I think for the
Yes.
audience's benefit, they really do highlight some of the strength of your writing and certainly your book, Secrets of a Strong Mind. So here's one. The author is intolerant of the approaches of some self-help books, warning her readers in plain terms. I love this. Forget all the pseudo-psychology that exhorts you to mimic the traits and behaviors of people more confident and successful than yourself. That does nothing but exacerbate the problem because real confidence must come from within. Oh my
So
gosh. Oh, I
true.
love that. Yeah, yeah. What
Mhm.
and that kind of reflects it. The next one, though, and I'll just read a partial. Kwai's approach is a winning one because its directness helps convey the feeling of a tough love friend dispensing advice rather than a disinterested lecture speaking about general principles. That
Mhm.
tough love theme comes through. I think I've mentioned in a number of my articles, curating your content, that I feel like I get my rear end kicked appropriately so every time I read one of your articles. So
Yeah.
why the tough love theme? Why, I mean, that's your style. Tell us where that came from.
Well, for your readers and listeners who don't know, I was born and raised on a very remote cattle ranch in the middle of Wyoming, and we
Right.
had, I mean, several hundred head of cattle and several thousand acres. So, it was. I learned tough love there. I learned self-sufficiency.
Mm-hmm.
I learned to take care of myself. I couldn't rely on someone to save me. I was not coddled.
Yeah, I could imagine. And I do have to ask you, so because I've heard it in a number of your podcasts, what was your definition of fast food in that environment?
You have to remember this is remote Wyoming. It's not a farm somewhere. For us, fast food was hitting a deer at about 60 miles an hour.
Again, hopefully no one ever gets hurt. We know that's a dangerous issue, but every time I
It's
heard that, I started laughing.
usually the
Must be you're on
radiator
a
that gets
podcast.
the
Yeah,
first
right,
the deer
right.
and then the radiator. They can do serious damage, but yeah.
And the last one is a quick sentence from one of the reviews. She is no fluffy bunny, but she is not a self-improvement know-it-all either. That was an interesting one for you to publish on your website. The reference to no fluffy bunny kind of jumps out at me. So
Right. And again, and we all have an image we
yeah,
like to portray, and some of those images fit into different genres
yeah.
easier or better than others. I learned early that fluffy bunny approach, the whole coddled approach, was not going to get me anywhere in life. And it
Mhm.
started on the ranch, and then it really picked up speed in the FBI as an FBI
Oh,
agent.
yeah, what a
So, I mean, you land on your feet. I mean, you have to find ways. You're confronted with adversity. You're confronted with problems and the unexpected every day. And it's all about how you land on your feet when you are confronted with the unknown. So and to do that, you have to have solid roots.
Mhm.
You've got to be grounded. And I would say, I mean, that begins, that there's a whole philosophy behind that. Mine is you have to know yourself. I mean, I think it was Socrates who said, know thyself. That's the very, very first step. For
What a
most of
great
us.
what a great jumping in point. So maybe let's start here. Your focal point is mental toughness. First, get us all on the same page. What do you mean when you're talking about mental toughness?
Thank you for that question. In my definition, and everybody will have something a little bit different, but basically, it's managing your emotions and your thoughts and your behaviors in ways that will set you up for success. And the toughest one, really, or the first place to start is the emotion, because we so frequently let our emotions sabotage what we really want out here. I mean, we get caught up in a situation where we lack confidence, or we're not sure. Adversity hits us. We're not sure which way to move. And we let our emotions take over. And it's like, oh, woe is me. Life is against me. I'll never make this happen. And to that mentality, I say, if there are no heroes to save you, you be the hero. I mean, it's not rocket science.
So, I'm thinking about my audience, as you know, is emerging leaders all the way to the C-suite. So I
Yes,
love to split my time between those on the front lines, those working in the middle of the organization, and those at the top. They all have unique sets of challenges.
they do.
But cultivating mental toughness at each level, I think, is just fascinating and critically important to them. How did you go about? I mean, again, it's your upbringing, your background. When did you kind of recognize that, hey, this whole thing, I have to be this way in order to not only survive, but to thrive? When did this happen for you?
I can give you an example from my childhood,
Mhm.
and I mean, I can give you examples throughout my life where fear was probably the biggest motivator, where I either had to perform or the consequences would be significant.
Mhm.
And I think probably there's many examples, and for whatever reason, this morning, what pops to my mind is when I was about, I'm going to say, between 8 and 9, something like that. And I'd been given a quarter horse to ride. It was
Mhm.
a good cutting horse. And my dad, who did not suffer fools, said, I want you to cut, pointing at me, LaRae, cut that bull out from that herd of cattle and bring it into the corral, because I'm going to sell that bull. I'm going, okay, I could do it. And besides, my dad was more like an order, so I knew I had to do it.
Gotcha.
So I'm out there and I'm trying to, the horse is doing its job, and I'm, reining it in. And all of a sudden, that bull just turned around and charged my horse. And
Oh,
he hit my horse on the front shoulder,
uh-huh.
and the horse was spooked. And in that situation, he's doing a little bucking and a little pivoting, and I said, I don't care. I am hanging. That horse is not losing me. It could have bucked sky high. I would have stayed with that horse, because otherwise I would have been in front of that bull. And so the horse got away. I got away, but I still had a problem, because my dad was off here somewhere. He'd given me this job to do, and he
Mhm.
expected me to bring that bull in. So I'm just sitting on the horse, wondering what now. And so I knew one thing. I knew that the horse upset the bull. I mean,
Right.
he saw it as a threat. So I got off the horse. I'm not stupid, because there was a pile of rocks nearby that I could scramble to if the bull charged
Okay.
me.
Right.
But I knew that horse was a problem. And so I represented a smaller problem to this bull. And so this is where confidence came in. And I wasn't sure, as an 8-year-old, where does your confidence come from? What kind of voice do
Mhm.
you have? And it was just, I just knew that I was I had to be the right person, because I was the only person. So I just kind of stared at the bull, and the bull stared right back. And then it swung its head, and snot flew from one side to the other. And I knew the bull was still a little pissed off, right? So I just, I found a deeper voice than
Mhm.
my 8-year-old voice. And I just said, shoot, let's move on.
Mhm.
And the bull kind of looked at me and shook his head again. But he turned around and he started moving in the direction of the corral. So I never got on the horse again. And but I had the reins, I had him behind me. And we just kind of moved that bull closer to the corral. And finally we made it. And my dad took over from there and with his horse. And so what happened between that bull and my dad and his horse, I don't know. All I knew was that I did my job. And so that was one of the first examples I have of where, I was scared to death. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the confidence in myself, really, but I just knew I had to do something to move forward. And I think that's where a lot of people are. You don't have to be in front of a chart. The charging bull can look like a lot of people. I have had suspects in investigations that looked a lot like that charging bull coming at me. But it's just, keeping your wits about you, keeping your emotions under control. I didn't realize that till later, but keeping those emotions under control were what allowed my thinking brain to take over. And boy, that tussle between the emotional limbic system brain and the thinking brain is the biggest battle we face.
You kept control in the executive control center. You didn't fall victim to amygdala hijack. And by the way, I'm throwing out terms your husband, the neuroscientist, would probably look at me funny with, but you kept control there. What a great story. And you know what? I suspect that everybody in the workplace who's facing a challenging conversation, a tough feedback discussion, a difficult performance evaluation, a tough board meeting, none of them are necessarily staring down the bull, but it's their own version of it, as you said. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, my story is not meant to encourage people to go out and become cowboys. It's to recognize that we all have adversity. We all have these roadblocks. We all face something that looks bigger and bolder than us. Right? I mean, we all face that. And it's how we respond that is going to make us mentally tough, because a wimp is going to run or just capitulate, or whatever, or let somebody else handle the difficult problem. That's the answer today.
Right. Sure.
Oh, well, let somebody else handle it. I don't want to have to be, inconvenienced, or, it might hurt my feelings or something. And I just have so little tolerance for that mindset. It's just childish.
I love that. Yeah, we're kindred spirits in that regard. I once worked with, and he'll remain nameless, but he was a senior executive by mistake, I think. And his mantra on anything tough was, that's a big and an important issue, and we should deal with it at the right time. Guess what? It was never the right time. Oh my! I hear those words echoing in my mind all of the time. So, a definite wimp description there. So one of the things I see here, and it came from, I think, the site, I took your mental toughness assessment. It was fascinating. It challenged me to try and be honest with myself. I'm actually a little worried that I lied. I may need to do it again because it came out pretty good. And I'm not sure I feel as mentally tough as your assessment told me I am. So
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what I hear is there's a clear relationship between mental toughness and your ability to develop emotional intelligence, control your responses, set effective goals, stay cool under pressure, and move past roadblocks. That is a hefty helping of benefits and a tie. Is that research-based, LaRae? Is there a causal relationship between mental toughness and our ability to do those things?
Yes, there is. And in fact, that mental toughness assessment has been verified by the Department of Psychology at Arizona State University. Because, again, my husband is a neuroscientist, and so he's sort of guided me, but it was still my thing. And I had to make it applicable to my audience. And so I put this questionnaire together, and then went to Vanessa Perez at the clinical psychology department at ASU. And I said, listen, I need you to help me formulate this and put this and just verify that I'm on track here. And indeed she did. I mean, and it has been verified, and it's free. I mean, anybody can take the assessment, and there's no strings attached. It's really a tool to help your listeners and your readers gain an insight into areas of where they might need improvement. And then I've got modules too that are if people want to dig deeper, because again, like I said, everything is based in neuroscience and social psychology. But what is interesting, Art, is that by and large, people across the board. And Vanessa, the psychologist, did this for me, but she found that finding purpose. These are the areas that people were low in.
Right.
And the areas that were low, there are 3 areas consistently among those: finding purpose in life. That was one which really surprises me. A positive can-do attitude was number 2. And the third was resilience. And those were the three areas of all of those different areas that were measured that people consistently scored lower in. And so to me, that's incredibly interesting, because then I have to ask, what is keeping you from finding your true north, your purpose in life? Or what is that can-do attitude? And I have thoughts on that, why people are so confused about it. And resilience, which was so needed right now.
Oh my gosh, just think of the world we're living in at the time of this interview
word.
and all that's going on. So yeah, resilience and mental toughness. So question on the purpose. I find that fascinating. That's a topic with a lot of my career coaching clients, particularly those a little bit later in life who have kind of run the corporate gauntlet for years, or whatever it is that they've done. They've been educators, they've been medical practitioners, and they're ready for something different.
Yeah.
Almost to an individual, they don't know their purpose. They don't have a sense of it.
I
Any
know.
thoughts on why we struggle to find that? And by the way, some conflate that with their passion, and I take umbrage at that. They shouldn't be conflated.
No, absolutely not. I'm a big one on that. And I think a lot of that you really hit on. People can't separate passion from purpose. I mean, and this is the thing that I would hope everyone would remember, is that passion is all about you. It's all about what brings you happiness, or those moments where it's all about you and you feel wonderful about yourself. Purpose is about someone other than yourself.
So well said. Yeah.
Whereas you are actually working towards some greater good. It's not all about you. It's not feeding the me machine, which is so popular today. I mean, that's all. And please, these self-help books are just they're hurting more than they're helping, because so often it's all about what you can do and how you can be. And we need that, because we need the confidence. However, that passion is so different than purpose. And a lot of these self-help books don't really help people get to the bottom of what makes them tick. And instead, we have a lot of very inane sort of, whether it be in television or movies or the books we read or the podcasts or the things we read, they don't really have a lot of heft to them. It's like putting a Band-Aid on cancer. Oh, we'll make it look good for a while.
Right. We'll feel good for a while.
Yeah. And then your clients are coming back to you saying, "Oh, I don't know. What is my purpose? I've spent, 70 years, 65 years, 60 years, whatever it is on this earth. And it's like, what have I really done? All I focused on was that corporate bottom line." And yeah, that will suck the soul from you if that is your purpose. It's your job. We all have jobs and we all need to make house payments. I'm not saying that. But along with that, encourage yourself to think a little bit deeper about what really is important to you and how you can give back.
And sometimes you need a little help from a friend. So I think I had shared with you the first time we connected a few weeks ago. A CEO who I worked for came up to me, and this was not all that long ago, 15 years ago or so, which isn't a long time in the span of my lifetime. And he looked at me and he goes, out of the blue, he goes, "You got your purpose all wrong." All right, I'm pretty self-aware. I'll bite. What do you because yeah, you think your purpose is about growing businesses and driving strategy and creating incredible results. And he goes, "You're okay. You're good at that. Your purpose is about helping people do things they never thought possible." And he stopped me in my tracks. It's like, oh my gosh, this individual just articulated what I felt internally, but had never been able to verbalize there. So sometimes we need a little help from our friends, or maybe a 2x4 over the head on that one.
That's so true. Yeah, and I think that we all have this emptiness inside of us, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And as we get older, Sometimes we get old, and sometimes wisdom and age don't always travel
Sure,
together.
sure.
Sometimes age just shows up by itself.
Mhm.
But at some point, and there's been so many studies done of palliative care nurses and people who were with others at the end of their life. And
Mhm.
it was like, what were their biggest regrets? And by and large, it was never about, God, I wish I'd gotten a bigger house, or I wish I'd gotten a newer
Yeah, right,
car,
right,
or,
right.
whatever.
I
It
wish I'd
was
spent more time at the office. Yeah.
exactly. It's never that. It's, what I really, and these studies are out there. You can look them up. What they really missed out were deep relationships, investing in other people and having other people invest in them. It was those deeper relationships that a lot of really busy executive types on the A types are just, they don't have time for
Sure,
relationships. And
sure.
I was that person for many years.
Mhm.
I was that person. I just I didn't have time for people. I was on a road. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting more joy. I got a lot of joy from my work initially, but as time went on, I was losing it, and I didn't really understand why. And now I do. I could have stopped so many times along the road and helped people, and I didn't. And
Cool.
I regret that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very powerful, very powerful. So a word that I extract from a lot of your content is authenticity.
Mm.
And I find, I don't know if you do, but I find a lot of people, even in personal life, who are walking around being someone else, someone they think they need to be. And again, here I go. I'm not really playing amateur psychologist or pop psychologist here. It's just an
No,
observation.
it's true though, Art. It's very
And
true.
we can't be mentally tough when we're like that.
No, we can't. And this is where thinking gets a little contorted,
Hmm.
because so many people think that mental toughness is bulldozing your way through problems and obstacles, or over people, or whatever. And that might work in football, or
Hmm.
whatever, or on the ski slope, but it
Right.
doesn't work in real life. I mean, that's just not a winning combination. But that is the approach. When I say strong mind or
Hmm.
mental toughness, that is exactly what they think. Oh, that means I just need to, buck up and just keep moving forward. And they really misunderstand what resilience is about. I mean, that approach totally, because mental toughness means you are resilient as well. You're authentic. The
Hmm.
thing of it is, I don't know if we have time for a story.
Sure.
My first really big brush with the importance of authenticity was when I was working off undercover, believe it
Hmm.
or not. And I was, it's in my book, the story's in my book, but I was a new agent. I should have known better, but I was brand new. And so I'd seen the movies, and it's like, oh, this guy and working in a organized crime squad needed an arm charm, for a barbecue. He was undercover
Uh-huh.
as like a gang member, right? And these guys were into extortion and murder. I mean, it was serious stuff.
Ooh.
So I said, oh yeah, that sounds like so much fun, because I'm going to be working undercover. And I've seen all the movies and TV shows, and I know what all that stuff is about, right? And I just laugh when I watch FBI portrayed on TV. It's so
It's how
pathetic.
we as the public know the FBI.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, it's pathetic, and it's misleading, and it's dangerous. But
Hmm.
I digress. So I'm at this barbecue, and it was in Phoenix, my first office. And I'm obviously fair, and it was an outside barbecue, and I needed to go inside to get some sunscreen. And I went to the bedroom where they'd taken my handbag when I'd got there and everything. And I walked in, and there were two women going through my handbag.
Ooh.
And I'm going, oh, that's not good. I mean, whatever. And I just acted like,
And
oh,
they probably weren't looking for sunscreen.
no, I don't think they were. And so I just acted like nothing was wrong. I said, oh, excuse me. I mean,
Right.
I just need my sunscreen, whatever. But then, and of course, alarm bells are going off. I knew I had a fake ID. I'd left all my real ID at home. There should be nothing, left my gun at home. There should be nothing in that handbag that would betray me. But they were suspicious. And so 3 guys walked in behind me and they closed the door. And I just knew I was in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and these were not just, these were serious criminals. And so they started questioning me about why I was there. And what did I do for a living? And who was that jerk I was with, right? And so I realized that they suspected the undercover agent that I'd come with. And so therefore they suspected me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just knew I was in, I know this is a family show. I was in deep shit.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm sorry.
Well said. Well said.
Okay. And so I just kind of knew at that moment, and I was very young. I was 25. This was like the youngest you can get into the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And I just told him everything about myself. I just told him everything except my real name and where I worked. But I told him about the ranch in Wyoming. I told him my frustration of living in such a rural area where horses and cattle were my only friends. I mean, and it just so happened that one of these women that were in there was from Kansas. And she said, "Oh, I know that feeling." And we had developed a bond because I was being real. I wasn't trying to pretend to be some, executive that was in over their head. I wasn't trying to be, a tough broad or anything like that. I was just, hey, I just wanted out. And I was as honest as I could be. And, that little lady, she was the shortest, smallest person in the room. She walked to the door and she opened it and she said, "We're done."
Mm-hmm.
And I got out of there alive. It turned out that the undercover agent I went with, they had put a hit out on him. And so he was immediately transferred to another city. But I will say this about authenticity. But I was never mentioned. So
we have to pause and just absorb this story. None of us have experienced that in my worst board meetings and my most challenging moments. How did you maintain control of yourself?
Well, you know what? There is sort of this innate, I was scared. So I kind of go back to that bull story at the beginning.
Right.
And there were many others. I just chose that one that sort of formed a mindset as a kid, and then as a young adult, and then in this situation where I had to save myself. No one was going to come in and rescue me. And with that, I knew I'd done it before. I pulled myself out of several difficult situations, and I had the confidence I could do it again. I knew, though, I had to be authentic, because trying to pretend to be a member of a biker gang or some organized crime, trying to pretend, I didn't have the background to do that. My only background was with that bull back in Wyoming, or it was, in real situations. And so I just leaned into that. This is who I am. And the only time I ran into trouble working undercover was when I tried to be somebody I wasn't.
I love that story. Help me translate it to the CEO. She's in front of her board. The latest results aren't good. The board is unhappy, as boards are apt to be in those situations. Nothing that she can offer seems like a fitting plan to recover for the year. What does that individual do at that point in time to leverage the bull, to leverage the the FBI scenario there? What do they do, and how do they do it?
Well, and I'm sitting on a couple of boards myself, so
So you are one of those people.
I am one of those people, and I want to know. And in fact, we have run into it in a way. It's something quite similar, talking about fiscal.
Sure.
In this case, it was the fiscal responsibility. In another case, it was about his identity. And I hate to say this, but because he was Jewish. It was because he was Jewish. And the pro-Palestinians I don't want to get into specifics, but very liberal city on the West Coast,
Okay.
very near San Francisco. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm very near. So all I'm saying is that it got so bad because they considered him their enemy.
Ah,
And he tried to reach out to them. He could have been more effective.
mhm.
And his downfall was he wasn't more authentic. He was, well, this is the Jewish point of view and whatever. And and that's fine, but he was putting up a front,
Mm,
and they could see through that.
mhm.
And I get it. It was his job. He was trying to save his job. It didn't work. He was let go because of his lack of empathy and his lack of transparency. That's why it was let go.
Mhm.
Another situation in a board I'm on, it's a fiscal responsibility, and the CEO is in a situation where the buck stops with him,
Mhm.
whether or not he's personally responsible, but in a way he is. And so we just said, listen, you have to take a more active role. And he very humbly said, what do I need to do? You have ideas, and I need your input. I need your help
Mhm.
in order for me to do what I need to do to overcome this fiscal hurdle. And so his humbleness at that point, and he's really just rose to the top. I mean, he has really pulled through, but his humbleness and his willingness to listen to what our suggestions were, and we didn't all agree. I
Sure.
mean, we all had, but there was a prevalent thought about where he needed to get ahead of this and how he could do it. And he did it. And we are in much better shape because of what he did. So I just think humility and not being defensive. That's one thing about the fiscal situation. He was not defensive.
Yeah.
He said, I know, I know, and I need a team. We need to work as a team in order to figure out a way to move beyond this. And it worked.
That's a priceless lesson for so many people in organizational settings, right? Where, for whatever reason, they're under pressure for something.
Oh
And
yeah.
either defensiveness or what was my earlier career malady was to go on the offensive at that moment in time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I came from a family where we argued for sports. So, somebody starts picking
Right.
a fight with me, I'm going to fight back twice as hard. It turned out that was interesting for like a week or so. People thought I was really aggressive, and then it became a factor. So, thankfully, I had someone who coached me out of that.
It's just
Mhm.
the humility a lot of
Yeah,
times.
yeah,
And when you get to a certain point, and you climb that ladder
yeah.
and you're expected to have all the answers, particularly in front of a board where you don't want to show weakness.
Hmm.
Uh, the other incident I talked about with the Jewish individual, he showed weakness,
Hmm.
and that was the death. And the other one, he was humble. He listened to us with humility and a willing heart to
Hmm.
listen and learn. And I think a lot of times this Peter principle, I mean, we've all heard about it, right? We're
Sure. Yeah,
promoted to the point of
yeah,
incompetence.
yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's taken as a personal affront. You were insulting me. And they, instead of responding in a way, in a learning, in a way that would embrace new ideas and say, maybe I could tweak this. It's a
Mhm.
humility.
But
And
can't
a
it be
lot of
interpreted as weakness, LaRae?
well, it can be. It
Yeah.
absolutely can be. However, the way that this CEO handled it was, I understand, and this is what I've been doing. This
Mhm.
is what I've been
Right.
doing.
Okay.
And this is what has worked, and this is what has not worked. He was
Mm.
willing to acknowledge that. And then so we instantly became a team where, okay, this works. That's great. What about this? That should maybe be thrown out altogether and try something new. And
Mhm.
he was willing to embrace that newness,
Sure.
that he had the confidence that he could pull it off.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, and I haven't coached a lot of executives, but all of those that I have coached, confidence, when you really, dig down into what is keeping them from moving into a new way of thinking,
Mhm.
it's confidence, or lack of confidence, because they're so sure that, this has been the winning formula for 20 years. I shouldn't have to change. But life changes, people changes,
Sure.
circumstances, culture, whatever, it changes. And having the humility to say, you know, I might need to rethink that. And it's not a weakness. Because you're willing to say and stand up for what you have done.
Mhm.
It's not like, oh man, I have just failed or whatever. It's not a weakness, but it's like, okay, this is my thinking behind it. So where can I improve? How can I improve? And that's where you talked about it earlier, Art, of having people around you who are honest enough to say, you're in a rut.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been the same old thing for 20 years,
So key, so critical.
you
So
know.
tell me what your perspective, please critique me in real time. My perspective in the organizational environment has been when facing complex or even wicked problems where there's no single solution, is I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to find a way to figure it out. It's kind of been my ongoing mantra, you know.
It's a
Positive,
good one.
good. I mean, it's a self-confidence that we'll find a way forward somehow. You surround yourself with smart people and we'll get there. Don't have to know all the answers because life is tough. Life is complex.
But what you're saying when you say that is that you are a leader. That is leadership. That is saying, you know what, maybe where we're at right now is not ideal, but together we can do that. And I am here to help each of us find that way. That is leadership. Leadership, I think too often leaders believe that being a leader means having all the answers.
The answers, right. Yeah.
And it's just not true. You're only human. And there's this undue pressure on you put on yourself on having all the right answers and producing all the right direction for people to go or whatever. And that's not really leadership. Leadership is saying, wait a minute. A manager can manage their way through a forest or whatever,
Right.
but a leader will say, this is the wrong forest. You know what I'm saying?
I like that one.
And so, yeah, but it means stepping up and taking the long view and the longer view of what is working, what isn't. And the thing is, if it's not working, and I don't know if it's sexist to say this now, but being man enough or being woman enough to step up and say that takes guts, that takes confidence, it takes leadership. And it's not weakness. You're simply pointing out the inevitable unless you turn obvious, that beast around.
You know, it's funny. I've shared with many, my single greatest day in a leadership role, I did absolutely nothing. And it was both humbling and exhilarating all at the same time because the team around me, we were selling a company and I had to focus on that. And the team around me was executing on so many important things and they were doing it wonderfully. And I literally stepped back and looked at it and said, you know what? This is amazing. And darn, nobody needs me anymore. So,
but you're showing leadership.
Yeah.
I mean,
I hope I was. Yeah.
Leaders, and that's another thing. They always think they have to be out front. And of course, we do need that visionary leader. That is what a leader does. Sure. They have the vision. But a good leader has equipped the team to really take the hard, to take their own burdens and be responsible and build their own confidence. Because your job as a leader is to grow other leaders, right?
Grow other leaders, no doubt about it.
So, and by example, by allowing them and giving them the confidence that yes, this is where you're going, and it's you will do a great job. So it's being part cheerleader, it's being humble enough to step out of the way so someone else can be a leader. And egos are just they're tough to deal with, and it doesn't matter where you are on the pecking order. Ego can always run into it. And I actually think being authentic, even my example in that room, I lost my ego. The ego had nothing to do with it. It had who are you to question why I'm here or whatever. You know what I mean? Ego could have derailed that really quickly. But if you can, that's where the humility comes in. And it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So, you know what I mean? It's not me all the time.
Right. You could have chosen so many strategies in that moment, and almost all of them would have led to an unfortunate outcome. I'm so happy you chose that strategy. So a
Yeah.
question for you. I have an individual that I've worked with from time to time, and she's brilliant and I admire her. Her underlying philosophy, though, is fake it till you make it. And we hear that phrase in common parlance all of the time.
Mhm.
Give me your perspective on that. I struggle with it. I've
I do
suggested
too.
it's going to be a derailment factor at some point.
Well, the fake it till you make it is fine unless you really buy into it.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if you really believe that you can fake it,
Okay.
that will get you, that will get you in the door.
Hmm.
Actually, it will. It will get attention initially. But if you haven't got the legs behind you to actually make it,
Hmm.
you're dead in the water. I mean, that will take you so far. And if your brushes with the board members or other people are kind of cursory or fleeting or just sort of at a shallow shelf level,
Hmm.
faking it is going to be fine. But when you really get down to the nuts and bolts, if you don't have the legs to take you where you need to go, it's all been for nothing. And those legs need to be, of course, competence in what you're doing, of course. But it also needs, the understanding of what resilience is about. You need to have an understanding of where emotional intelligence fits into all of this. I mean, you really have to kind of do the work. So I'm with you on that. I think it's a great way to start. It's not a great way to end up.
Agreed. So this whole mental toughness issue, so powerful, so important. Born with or develop, nature, nurture, help me, because I'd like to get to how can those listening, how can we out there develop and strengthen more of it?
Right. No, mental toughness is not something you're born with. Absolutely not.
Mm.
It's something we can all learn. And I would also say that, in the FBI, theories are nice,
Mm-hmm.
evidence is better.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to understanding yourself, and that's what mental toughness really is. I mean, when you think about it, it's managing your emotions, your thoughts, and your behavior, because this is the bottom line. You change your mindset, you change your behavior, you change their outcome.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. But it starts with mindset right up in here, and getting that emotional limbic brain system we talked about earlier, talking to the thinking brain, because there's no logic, has no appeal to emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't. But what does appeal to your emotional limbic brain system is empathy. So the first thing, and again about emotional intelligence, but this is your own emotional intelligence. This is you saying to yourself, I'm scared. I don't know what to do, or whatever the situation
Right.
is. I mean, it's like acknowledging what that emotionalness going like this. I mean, that little brain is telling you either fight or flee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so it's getting those two brains working together, which is a kind of a big deal.
So
And once you
how do we exercise that muscle though? How do we do that?
uh,
It's easy to say and hard to do for sure. I've struggled with
oh, it is. And so I can give you kind of an example if
it.
you
Sure,
want, how I
please.
had to use it in my real life,
Um,
because it was my first arrest. And again, I was in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is where I live now,
okay.
ironically. But I was never supposed to be the one to make the arrest. I was like 2 weeks out of the academy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just along with the case agent, who was my training agent, and the FBI SWAT team was the one who was going to make this arrest because he was wanted for murder in, I think, Alabama or somewhere back east.
Mm-hmm.
And he had fled. And that's when the FBI gets involved. We don't really work murder, to be truthful. It's not a federal crime. It's a crime in each state.
Okay.
But as far as murder, the only time we get involved is they cross states, and then it becomes interstate. And
Okay.
that's when it happened. So in a way, what happened was that we hit traffic, high traffic, and one by one, the SWAT cars got cut off.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron, my case agent, was like, he stayed on his bumper. He said, I'm not letting this guy go. And he was considered armed and dangerous as well. And so we just hit a series of green lights and traffic. And the idea was to make a traffic stop, right? So when we stopped, then we would all get out, or
Sure.
they would get out and
Sure.
make the arrest. Well, that didn't happen. So we're down the road, and all of a sudden we hit our first red light. And I looked and I said, Ron, there aren't any SWAT cars behind us. The FBI is not, SWAT team is not behind us. And he just sat there, and we pulled up. So we were right beside the suspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was in the shotgun seat and he was in the driver. I mean, he was probably like 3 feet from me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Ron just said, you're going to have to make the arrest. And he said, we can't risk losing him. And so, okay, that's my limbic system. It's like making excuses. I can't do this. I've just got out of the academy. I've never shot. I mean, I've shot 3,000 rounds in the academy, but I'd never pulled a gun on a real person before. I mean, I was making all these excuses, and my limbic brain system was just trying to sort out what to do. It was just sputtering. And so I had to get this brain thinking to this one, because I had to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't just say, oh, Ron, I can't do this. You're going to have to do it instead. I mean, that just doesn't work in real life, right? Or at least some people
would have been a problem for your career in the FBI, I suspect.
Yeah, it's a problem if you want a career in the FBI. So I had to get these two brains working together. And I knew I had to get the thinking brain in control. So I just knew there'd be no way. He was a big guy. I mean, he must have been 6 foot something and 300 pounds. He was huge. And I just knew there was no way I could, like we were taught in the academy, pull him out of the car, throw him to the ground, slap on handcuffs. I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I just started thinking in positive terms. I just, getting this brain to work. I said, so I took off my raid jacket, because I had one of those FBI raid jackets right now, because I didn't want to alert him who I was. Right. And then I pulled my sweater over my gun so I wouldn't see the gun. And, I don't look really like your typical FBI agent. So that helped. And so what I did is I just got out of the car, and I just knew, I said, you remember all the training you got in the academy. I was still scared, but I was thinking it through. And I was acknowledging my emotions, because I was scared to death. I'll be honest with you. So I got out of the car, and then I tapped on this guy's window, kind of smiled, and he kind of smiled back. and then I asked, I kind of, motioned for him to roll his window down, which he did. And then I just pulled my gun and said, FBI, you're under arrest. And he was so shocked that he had a clutch car, and his foot slipped off the clutch, and his car lurched forward into the intersection. And so, but I just followed him with my gun, and I did not know my next step, but I knew I had to do it. I knew I'd done it before in these exercises at Quantico. And so that calmed this limbic system, which is right in the back bottom of the brain, where it's at.
Sure.
It calmed it down enough to know that my hands weren't shaking, which they were initially. It wouldn't have been good for me to go,
that wouldn't have made a good impression.
Would not have been good.
He might have laughed.
He might have laughed and just run right through the intersection.
Yeah.
So, but by then I heard FBI, and the guys were running up through the cars, the lanes with their guns, and they made the actual arrest. But I stayed there with him until they did what we learned, and they pulled him out and threw him to the ground. Right? Yeah, they did all of that. But it was a conscious decision on my part that I had to acknowledge the fear. You can't pretend. And that's where I think a lot of people just, we're taught, oh, be positive, be happy all the time. Oh, that doesn't feel good. Oh, deny it, move away from it. Don't acknowledge it. But I mean, that is a recipe for disaster, because if you don't acknowledge if you're not authentic, if you're not real about what you're feeling, you can't deal with it. Instead, you're trying to push it to the side all the time. And that's where so many people, I think, really sabotage themselves.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I think that's just a critical issue. So someone you make me think of is Dr. Mark Goldstein. He writes, he's a psychologist, his book, Just Listen, and also his other book, Talking to Crazy, both phenomenal. And he actually talks about an amygdala hijack reset process, which goes to recognize, oh crap, this is a bad situation.
Yeah.
I'm really frightened. I wonder what I should do. But to kind of talk yourself through a multi-step process in near real time, I mean, as fast as you can, I imagine when you're navigating that type of scenario, you don't have a lot of time for inner self-talk other than you've got to draw upon, your training and stuff like that. But yeah, so critical. And I've struggled with it over time. I've gotten better at it though, thank goodness.
When it comes to it, if you're willing to be honest with yourself, and
Hmm.
I think that's what it comes down to.
Hmm.
I mean, I shouldn't have been so scared, but I was. But I acknowledged it to myself. I
Sure.
acknowledged it. I wasn't trying to be the superhero that you see in movies and do the scissor kick, whatever. I mean, you see all that crap and it's just laughable.
Mhm.
But I had to be honest about what I was really thinking. And Art, I really think deep down, that's where a lot of people really mess up. They're just not honest with themselves. They don't want to acknowledge an emotion that is ugly or
Mhm.
that is embarrassing. And
Mhm.
so they try to tamp it down. And, we're told by media and self-help experts
Right.
and everybody else, don't, be happy or be optimistic or whatever. And it's just that's, I think, one reason where I have positive can-do attitude is rated low on my mental toughness assessment,
Interesting. Okay.
because people don't understand how important it is to embrace negative emotions. They just won't go there. But every emotion has something to teach us. I mean, every emotion has something to teach us, whether it's flattering or not.
Mhm.
And it may be an ugly truth about yourself. Maybe you find out you are a little bit prejudiced about something or
Mhm.
whatever. I mean, something ugly may bubble up, but you have to be adult enough to acknowledge it and say, you know what, I need to address that. I need to get to the root of it. And that takes self-awareness. And that takes work. A lot of people don't want to go there because they may discover something about themselves that's kind of ugly that they don't want to acknowledge. But you can't suppress it. It's going to show up one way or another.
Yeah, right.
You can either control how that negative emotion shows up because you're aware of it and you're working on it, or you can be completely surprised and sabotaged, maybe when it really matters. So it's
That
kind of up
theme
to
that theme is so powerful in your work. So one of your recent articles, I love all of your articles, but four
thank you.
authentic ways to develop resilience when life gets hard. You highlight the first one is ditch the fantasy, which I think is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
You've just got to let go of that. Build confidence, embrace discomfort, and discover values. That last one is maybe a little cryptic. What do you mean by that? Embrace value or discover values?
Well, thanks for that question, because it's different for everyone.
Hmm.
But and and I'm not blaming today's society necessarily, but we are bombarded with so-called values all
Hmm.
around us. And that value may be a car, a new car, a bigger house, better clothes, different body,
Sure.
plastic surgery so that you look better. Those are not values. Those are just things you do to feed your ego.
Hmm.
That's ego driven. Values are what are important to you. And so many people, you mentioned it earlier, live by other people's values.
Hmm.
When you ask somebody, and I found this to be so interesting and concurring and recurring, is you ask somebody their values, and they really don't know how to answer that. They'll talk about things that are valuable. I mean, valuable.
Sure. Sure.
Um, but a lot of people, because I don't want to, because I know you have a lot of listeners and readers who really work on this, and that's important for them. I mean, they need to understand their values, and coaches like yourself help them develop an understanding of what is important. And I don't want to go into, the way parents are raising kids these days, but they don't raise them to have values. Most people don't even know what their values are
Hmm.
because they've never taken the time.
Yes. Right.
It's easier to assimilate what the neighbors are doing or what they think is valuable or whatever. Because to discover your own values means, again, you have to get out of yourself, in that it's not all about me. It's not all about me. It's about what is important. What is important to the bigger world? It's important to me too, but it's also important to others, and it
Mhm.
will find a way to benefit. That is how you find purpose. If you've got the good values, you will find your purpose. And I mean, right now we have such low, I mean, seriously, the way people who don't have values just have very low professional standards. I mean, they just do. And calling people, coddling them and protecting them doesn't do anything but make them dull and stupid. And that's where we are with a lot of people right now. They're just dull and stupid because they haven't been able to address the adversity in their life. They run from it. And every hardship, this is the thing, every hardship in life is a key to greater understanding about ourselves. So we can either choose to lock the future or unbolt the door. It's totally up to us. But it does mean honesty, authenticity. It means finding values. It means looking outside of ourselves for everything and kind of understanding how we can find a purpose in life.
What a great way to tie things together here. That was a fantastic wrap up. So I know that I have, and it's none of my business, but I keep sending notes to you saying, would you please write another book? I'm going to, I love your books. I recommend, I'm going to promote them through this podcast.
Thank you.
Maybe in the intro and in the blog and in the notes. It's remarkable. It's much needed content. And the way you tied things off here reflects that no nonsense tone. We do have to take responsibility for this. Are you going to write us another book, LaRae? Or I know you've shifted to painting now, or is that part of your life maybe closed and you're moving on to another?
No, it's not closed at all. I love writing, and I kind of feel it is a purpose. Talking about purpose. And again, it's not just so that you'll buy my books and I'll be able to buy something. No, it's not that. It's, right. I would hope, and again, it's a no coddling approach to life, because that's where reality is. And so I'm thank you for those words of encouragement. Painting is just a hobby, but I do like to paint. But writing is really where I find purpose. And so to stop writing would be would have a very negative effect on me. Whether or not I'm going to put that into a book, well, I'll have to work on that. I might. Okay. As you know, writing a book is hard work, and I'm not afraid of hard work. I just need to make sure that I know exactly what I want to write, and I've exhausted the research. Because I think when you write a book like mine, a nonfiction, it has to be based in research. Because I mean, you get a lot of stuff out there, and I think the one thing that I hope is that a lot of books are really good books. I'm not saying there's some really good ones out there about how to be more mentally tough, or how to be more confident, or how to be more resilient. It's not that, but what I think is important component that people like myself or those who've been in the trenches can offer are real stories. Because often they'll take stories from athletes, or they'll take stories from other people. And I'm speaking to you one-on-one. Right. It's my voice that went through the horror and the terror of a charging bull or a guy with a gun. And they did find a gun under that guy's driver's seat when they actually pulled him out of the car. So, I mean, I've been there, and all I can do is give you my responses. And then I encourage each reader, again, to excavate the significance of their own experiences, because mine are just mine. But every listener here has had an experience that formed the way they think about themselves and the hardship or adversity ahead of them.
I could talk with you and listen to you all day, LaRae.
Oh, Art, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been so fun.
What a pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for joining me on our kind of wander through your unbelievable experiences and sharing your wisdom. We're all grateful. Thank you so much.